Hello, and welcome to today's 18 group webinar on mastering data lineage for risk compliance and AI governance. My name is Sarah Underwood. I'm an editor here at 18 Group, and I'll be moderating today's webinar. Before we get started, I'd just like to share a few things we've got coming up with you, and you can see them on your screen and register if you think you'd like to come. First, we'd like to invite you to our 26th of June AI and Capital Markets Summit in New York City. Then looking forward, on September the 4th, we'll be hosting a webinar on unlocking value, harnessing modern data platforms for integration, analytics, visualization, and reporting. And after that, on the 9th of September, we'll host a webinar titled Hearing from the Experts, AI Governance Best Practices. So please feel free to sign up for those if you'd like to. Okay, let's press on with today's webinar. Our expert speakers today are Victor Godali, Head of Group Data Governance and Data Control at Danske Bank, Mark McQueen, Managing Partner at Ortega, and former Head of Visual Data Officer for Wholesale Banking at Bank of America Merrill Lynch, and Christian Bremeau, CEO at Meta Integration. I'll ask them to introduce themselves in just a minute, but a bit of practical information for you. We'll be running 3 poll questions today, and you can see those on the Slido panel next to your video screen. I'll let you know when they're coming up, so do please vote so that we can get some idea of where you are in terms of developing your data lineage, etc. There's also an area in the Slido for you to post questions for our speakers. You can post these at any time you like, and we'll answer these a little bit later and take on as many as we can. So please feel free to put your questions on the Slido channel there. Okay, so enough of me, and let me ask our experts to introduce themselves. Now, Victor, coming to you first, please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your interest here.
Sure thing. So, Victor, I work for Danske Bank as Head of Data Governance and Data Controls. And of course, one of the key things there is data lineage. We've been working on that for a few years now, but previously I also been working in all aspects of data management for the last 15 years or so.
Okay, thank you. Mark.
Yeah, Mark McQueen. I'm the managing partner for Ortega in North America. We are a global data analytics and AI management consulting firm. Follow our clients around the globe. We have offices in the UK, US, and Canada.
Okay, lovely. And Christian.
Hey, this is Christian Bremeau. I'm the founder and CEO of Meta Integration Technology. We've been around for 25 plus years. We are the leading metadata component provider to pretty much all the big brands outside, whether it's Microsoft, Purview, Power BI, or whether it's Informatica, SAP, SAS, Oracle, all these big names. We are the metadata components inside for their lineage. And that's what Meta Integration does. Nothing to do with the other Meta you might have heard about. We had the Meta Integration for long before that. And we also sell directly to customers under the Meta Carta brand, but it's the same lineage, obviously, something we've been doing for 25 years.
Excellent. Thank you all. Plenty of expertise in the room today. So let's get started with the poll question. It asks, to what extent has your organization implemented enterprise data lineage to improve risk compliance and AI governance? And so while you answer that question, let me come first to Victor to talk a little bit about the state of play on data lineage implementation across financial institutions.
Yeah, I think, to be absolutely honest, I think it's rather limited, especially if you talk about end-to-end lineage across the whole infrastructure. And of course, the bigger your bank and the more complex your infrastructure is, I think you will have even less end-to-end lineage. And also, this is also born in the self-assessments that are being made now and then by the financial authorities that are doing these self-assessments. I think limited would be my view on it.
Okay, thank you. Mark, what's your view?
I'm going to talk history a little bit. So 2009, after the financial crisis, regulator knocked on Big G-SIB's door that I was at and said, we want to see your commercial real estate data horizontally track transaction level data. that had never been asked for before. So what happened? We hired one of the big four. We had an army come in. We cobbled together with their help, a Uber spreadsheet of lineage data, piecemeal across that enterprise. And the minute they walked out the door with the finished package of lineage, it was stale. There was no ability to maintain it. So flash forward, lots of technologies can automate, particularly the technical side of the lineage. But it's been a real challenge to get the business engaged in lineage for the business lineage that's needed to be matched up with that technical lineage. Lots of enhancements are happening. Technology's getting closer and closer on the technical side, but we still got to have business engagement.
Okay. Christian, what do you see out there when you're in the market?
Cannot concur more with Mark. I mean, I think the biggest challenge is to integrate IT and business users. The biggest failures in data governance is they've not been well integrated with IT to start with, each talking their own world. Data lineage should be the common information between them, but the biggest mistake around is the way you present the data lineage to technical user is different than to business users. And that is one of the biggest failure out there. You need the common truth. That truth need to be updated in real time, monitoring the real system. But when you present it to the business users, lineage got to be way simpler than that. I'm searching for an invoice, a return on investment. All I want to know is immediately what are the related reports. I find the related reports. I open the reports. Where did they get that from? And then suddenly I find out that it comes from something very far back. And then I want to know, do we have other lineage about it? That's the answer to business users. But to give this answer to business users, it has to be automatically, and I insist, automatically maintained and reverse engineered from the truth. Now, the technical guys really want to see if that report is wrong, if there is a GDPR going there. Where is the transformation in my ETL? Where is my transformation in the BI, in the stored procedures? But don't show that to the business users. One truth, two presentations. Data lineage in the center.
Okay, thank you all very much indeed. Could we see the poll results, please? And Christian, you might like to comment on these. So
I need to see the poll first.
Yeah, there we go. It was a question was to what extent organizations have implemented enterprise-grade data lineage. So they're saying a majority to a good extent. Does that ring bells with you?
Well, obviously, I've got a biased answer to the question because I supply the data lineage for Microsoft. If you use Power BI, Microsoft use our technology to reverse engineer the lineage from Power Query and all the SQL processing. Same for Informatica. So obviously, I work with a lot of banks worldwide. We have an extreme large bank in Canada with 3 terabytes of lineage metadata. So these guys have done that for years. But I sympathize with what Victor said and Mark, that there are a lot that have not united yet IT with business users. And unfortunately, a lot of it relates to implementation and not one UI for everybody, but sharing the truth, not different product. Now, the good news here is people seem to pay attention to it. And there are a lot of things that have helped us achieving that. Things before we were doing metadata management many years ago, compliance was not the same. GDPR came in. GDPR was the best thing for metadata management and lineage, because when you ask for a private phone number or an SSN to be removed, if you don't have the proper lineage left and right, all the way to some Excel spreadsheet on the right to remove that information, you will never comply to GDPR to start with. Lineage is the answer. And, there are a lot of other compliance that requires lineage. You make a decision at the end of this quarter, if you cannot prove beyond reasonable doubt, where this information is coming from, you have a problem. So I'm glad to see that to some extent people are pushing it. And I think with today data products and not only doing BI, but doing AI on this data, you'd better know where it's coming from, and you'd better know if somebody else is using it. When we say lineage, it's not only going back, it's also lineage in both directions. Also, what is using this data. So I'm happy to see the result here.
Good. Okay, thank you very much indeed. And can we run another poll now, please? And this one asks, what are the challenges of data lineage at your organization? I have to tell you that management and people are not on this list, so these are more of the technical kind of challenges. And for our audience, please feel free to tick as many boxes as appropriate for your organization. And I'm going to come back to Christian again to hear what challenges the state of play presents for financial institutions. You've mentioned some of these things, the cultural aspects and so on. What sort of things from a, not super technical, but as a data aspect, that sort of area?
I would say the first one, I already said it 3 times, and I'll say it again. Share a metadata platform, but you need a different user experience. Don't expect the business and users to understand what your medallion architecture is, what is a staging area or anything. Display the lineage for business user differently. That's one. The second challenge is on the technical side, to get the right lineage to put it together. And fortunately, too many products are what I call shallow. They, either they don't get to the feature level lineage, what we call, column level lineage, and they don't have all the transformations going on in the tools. And they say, well, it's used by that report. Well, at what page? Which pie chart? And where is it coming from what transformation? That's, the depth and really how deep you process every language inside your technical data sources. And the third one is change management and automatic stitching. And change management and automatic stitching is key. It's not enough to say, I got everything from Snowflake or my good old Teradata. And by the way, you need to support both. That's a challenge in itself. Don't think everything is on the cloud. You still have a good old business object BI and Cognos as much as you got the latest. But then when you extract all this, automatic stitching is connecting the dots with everything you harvested for end-to-end lineage. This must be automatic and keep up with changes. High scale, high volume of metadata. When I mentioned this large bank in Canada, 3 terabytes of metadata is big, and you still need to present a simple answer and keep up with it.
Okay. Victor, what would you add there? I'll tell you that on the poll questions are things like data silos and all those age-old problems. What do you see?
Yeah, but I of course agree to Christian. I think the biggest problem is stitching and stitching it end to end. So for example, in our case and in many other banks, you have systems that are like old mainframe systems built in the 70s, and their ability to actually provide you with the data. And of course, then who is accountable for this? If you have silos going to silos, so you have to have someone who is accountable for the overall lineage. So I think that is one of the biggest challenges that people really have in this space, to be honest.
Okay, thank you. Let's see the poll results, if we may. And Victor, perhaps you'd like to comment on these. As I said, they don't include the things we've just mentioned, but these are some sort of fairly regular challenges in these sort of situations. Multiple data sources, is that something you'd see out there as a problem?
Yeah, for sure, because since you don't know where you have data all over the place, and people are sourcing data from all over the place, and they generally don't know why they're sourcing it. They always have been sourcing it from that place. And so these things kind of live on. And then if you want to start building the lineage with this, of course, all of these components make it extremely hard to even identify who is accountable for doing the lineage, where to start and where to end. And so, yeah, I mean, we are struggling with these as well, to figuring out what is the authorized source, what is not an authorized source, etc., etc. So absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Victor. And staying with you, what approaches can firms take to prioritize data lineage as part of a GRC program, and how would you expect this to work? Obviously, it's very important to get the sort of background in place here.
Yeah, so if it is a GRC program, they generally tend to have a regulatory driver most of the cases. And if you kind of look at the regulatory landscape, there are more and more regulations that almost in essence require you to have an understanding of your lineage. You need to understand, where is my data coming from? How did it get there? What are the controls we have in place? In essence, can we trust it? So I think it's a regulatory requirement, as simple as that. You just need to do it. And then you need to be able to do it for yourself to understand and to show the benefit. Okay, so we are in control of our data. We can use this data not only for the GRC purpose, but also for other business processes, such as advanced analytics or more advanced models, for example.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Mark, what would you add there? I'm sure you've worked with many clients in these sorts of areas. How would you set up a GRC program and get going from that perspective?
Yeah, leveraging what Victor said, treat your lineage as a risk control. So have your risk register that you're recording this in and integrate it into the overall control libraries of the risk organization. Then link critical data elements and key risk indicators, so that you're bringing the value of the lineage to life, as it relates to risk. And then finally, embedding your lineage outputs into compliance dashboards, so move to be able to report on what you have from a risk perspective. And all of this allows the compliance function to leverage lineage for impact assessments, audit trails, and regulatory reporting. And at that point, it becomes part of the way of doing work in your organization.
Okay, thank you. And staying with you, Mark, from a practical perspective, we talked about multiple data sources, legacy, and all those difficulties that we run up against in nearly all these situations, all areas of tech in financial institutions. From a practical perspective, what approaches can firms take to implement enterprise-grade data lineage, presuming that they don't have a lovely sparkly, set of integrated systems and data?
So we talked about lineage and we talked about metadata. Lineage is a critical part of comprehensive metadata. Define metadata as everything you need to know about your data to get it into control and keep it in control. And then I need a catalog to be able to record all of this. And that catalog has to have what Christian's talked about of the business user experience and the technical user experience. We commonly describe that as a business glossary and a data dictionary. And how do you then stitch those two things together so both sides of your organization, the business-oriented side and the technical side, can come and talk about the data and understand it. The very simple example that I use in this is if you go to a business person and say, hey, where is maturity date? Well, they say, well, that's on the 7th screen in my underwriting platform. It's down about half away on the right-hand side. That field right there, that's maturity date. You go to a technical person and they start talking rows and columns. So these two people can't talk to each other unless you stitch the business glossary and the data dictionary together.
Okay. Kristen, you're nodding your head. What would you add to
Oh,
that?
no,
I
cannot agree more. I mean, basically, I said it too many times, definitely. But the end user experience is pushed deeper than that today. It's been the approach that the data catalog is up front and center on that. And people had a hard time, even with a nice business UI and starting from the business glossary, to impose yet another tool to them. So the trend right now is actually rather the opposite, is use the tools you use all the time. Use your business object, use your Cognos, use your Tableau, use your Power BI. And these become augmented with side panels. There is a lot of great web integration where suddenly you got information about what you're looking at. And then they come to the data catalog because they've seen this information, what the business glossary related to what they see on the report is right there and where it's coming from. And you want to know more, then you go to it. And then you might open another report in another tool. So the business experience is even going deeper than having business glossary experience to it, is really deep integration with what you do every day in your Excel spreadsheet, in your BI tool. And I would say on the lineage also, what I often recommend is exactly the opposite, what makes sense to most people, is you start from the end to go to the beginning. What do I mean? People have a tendency to think lineage from left to right. And they go, and it takes forever for them to get results to the business users. I said, think about the opposite. How about you point first to all your key BI servers and reporting tool? Again, whatever you use out there. Then you're going to find out where they take data from. And it could be, your Snowflake and Oracle. Oh, but you forgot that these guys are stealing from this Excel spreadsheet and that other file out there. And then you build right to left. And as you progress, you already give early value to business users. Often the initiative starting from the left, and especially if you start very left, they give up before the end because they've not even reached the middle of the architecture. And of course, the architecture doesn't look what's on the PowerPoint slide. The real architecture is what is providing by reverse engineering what's in the actual tools implemented your data flow. And data catalogs, frankly, have not helped lately because data catalogs, I've always thought about it, about inventory, about the data stores. And one of you, I forgot if it was Mark or Victor, mentioned that it's not enough. To really get the truth, you need all the surrounding processes. And it could be a SQL script. It could be an ICTL in Informatica. It can be, some DBT jobs. And don't forget the BI. Some people do all the transformation in a BO universe or self-service BI. So data stores only doesn't cut it. You need all the processes. And again, automatic stitching. And automatic stitching is easy on the right side when it's all relational database, everybody understands. But more you go on the left, the more complex it is. You can have a BigQuery complex type in Google BigQuery, but behind is a JSON file. I don't want to get too technical, but it's an array of structure of array. And the stitching here is not as simple as you think. And by the way, even on the simple side of stitching a SQL server, oh, they forgot that they changed on the SQL server the data type from string to integer. They forgot to update the reports. Report didn't complain. But automatic stitching can already tell them behind Lineage that this report is probably wrong because what you're reading is from the wrong type and the tool didn't complain about it. Lineage is everything, seriously.
Okay, thank you. That's great. So moving forward and staying with you, Christian, please would you explain how enterprise-grade data lineage can improve transparency, risk data aggregation, and impact analysis, as well as something that I think you've all touched on already, the bridge between technical data flows and business process models. But let's first talk about transparency, risk data aggregation, and impact analysis.
Lineage has to be proven. There are also different forms of lineage. And observing log, on data stores, which is another form of doing lineage these days, doesn't cut it. Yeah, sure, looks like patterns. It's probably coming from that. But if somebody has to make a decision on a business report and that number is not right, it's not, we've been observing logs saying about this. They want to know which transformation in which tool, and it might involve 6 or 7 technology out there. So you need a full transparency about really what happened. You present it in a business simple way for the business users, but then if it's wrong, you need to, the same link need to also present the technical details for the technical person to answer that question and repair it if needed, kind of thing. Then business, connecting to business users, I mentioned some example like the BI tool integration to Lineage, business glossaries. Obviously, it's nice to arrive from a business term, as Mark mentioned, and Victor as well, and then drill down, tap down on that. But sometimes you need more than a business glossaries. At the high level, there are a lot of concept of business process modeling. So one of the things we've added a lot lately also is integrate business process model. And there are nice standards today, like BPMN used by SAP, and you can not only have the business terms associated to it, but have a real business process. I'm not talking about a data flow process on the technical side, but the business process of getting a loan and where these different steps of a process are actually connected to the data. So that's one from the business user process, business process at the top. There is also what is known as conceptual data model at the high level, meaning that things can be technically very complex deep inside the implementation in the Snowflake or whatever underneath. But at the high level, you can have a conceptual financial model that people can identify with, and they can start from either the business process model or the business conceptual model, or it could be a standard and then drill down. In fact, a lot of standards, this one is in finance, but obviously we work the same technology in healthcare, finance, and things like that. They have standard data models, and people want to go start from that, and they have the mapping to the physical system. So compliance here is also making sure that every concept is represented. And if you have an audit to say this concept, that's where it is in all my systems, kind of thing.
Okay, thank you. Mark, perhaps we could have now your thoughts on this. What does data lineage do for risk transparency analysis?
Well, Sarah, I love these questions because it's allowing us to peel the layers off the onion. And so this layer I really like. It's something that we've spent a lot of time thinking about and now trying to put it into action with our clients. So what is that? You've all probably heard the term data observability. What you may not have heard is the concept of design observability. Let's talk about these two in relationship to each other. So data observability is what happened to my data across the data lifecycle, across that lineage as it moves in your organization. Design observability is what is supposed to happen to my data across the data lifecycle. One thing about data lineage, having good data lineage on its own has not done anything to improve your data. It's just told you what happened to your data. Design observability, so let's unpack design. Design is your policy, your standards, your business process designs that are consuming data or creating data out of process steps, and ultimately your role-based procedures as to how you're going to execute good, sound data management across your data. We think of that set of design as documents. I've got a policy document, I've got a standard document. We need to change that paradigm. We need to think about that in terms of being content, and let's manage the design content. How do we manage the design content? We break it down and we record the design as metadata. Now that metadata needs to be human readable and machine readable. If I can machine read that policy statement, that standard rule, I can then go over to the data observability side of this. And if I'm capturing the right metadata on my actual data, I can prove dashboard by dashboard compliance that I've done to my data what I intended to do, and it's actually in existence.
Okay, staying with you and on the issue of compliance, we've touched on that before. How can that data lineage ensure compliance with obligations like BCBS 239, CCAR, IFRS 9, GDPR, which Christian mentioned before? Obviously, these are very demanding regulations.
So I'm going to go back to design observability. Part of design observability is understanding the regulations, understanding the requirements that are in those regulations, and recording those requirements and linking the requirements to your design that is executing against that requirement. If you've done that, again, you can then create whatever you want, a GDPR dashboard that looks at what are all the GDPR requirements, how did my design intend to execute against those, and did that happen on the actual data? Privacy is a great example. If I've categorized a piece of data that entered my data environment as private, my design says as soon as it's tagged as private, there's these 10 controls that need to be applied to that piece of data. The data observability side, if I can, through an activity log, identify at this time of, after that data entered into my environment, I applied control number 1, control number 2, control number 3. Again, I've gotten to compliance by dashboard when I combine design observability with data observability.
Okay, thank you, Victor. What would you add there as a practitioner and dealing with these kinds of things? Where does data lineage take you with these kinds of regulations?
Yeah, well, the simple answer is that these regulations and many other, they have a strict demand that you are able to have an enterprise grade data lineage. I mean, that's basically their starting point. But I think it's also important to know and understand why these things are in those regulations. Because in essence, what the regulators want to know is that they want you to showcase to yourself, but also to them, that you are actually in control of your data. That is by far the most important thing. They couldn't care less about your lineage, really. That's not the point. But they want you to have the confidence saying that I know these critical credit reports we have, I know how I can trust the numbers there, and I can trust them because I am in full control across the whole flow of data. I have the relevant controls in the right places and only in the right places, and I can. It's about showing trust, really, and show trust to society as well. That's the main reason why these things are to be found in the regulations themselves. I think that's kind of important to have at the back of your head. Why are we doing this, really?
Right.
I cannot
Okay.
agree more with Victor, if I may, pop on this one. I mean, it's really a lot of our regulations are driven by how much trust and understanding you have in your data architecture, data flow, and data lineage is at the core of it. And to really implement any of those, GDPR probably the stereotype of it, because people are interested in it. It's my private information. Where is it? It really the no child left behind on data lineage, where it could be your latest architecture, but also another architecture out there that basically is using classic stories and no child left behind, meaning that it's including the Excel spreadsheet that have a Power Query that actually take a lookup on the personal information on that file that you didn't think about. And data lineage is really at the core of that and the stitching of all of this. And that's what people have been missing the most on failures of GDPR, is the focus where it was primarily stored, not where it came from, where you got to take it at the root, and where else does it go. There is also another dimension to this on the compliance, and another failure sometimes on data lineage. Data lineage not only needs to support change management, detection of change, and then automatically bring what's new. Some reports have been updated, some have been changed, jobs have been changed, restitch all that. But you need all this and the version and configuration management. Most systems do not have an underlying metadata management platform that supports version and configuration management to the level that the question could be, well, that decision was made on the company based on the result of Q3, that spreadsheet or that BI report. You don't have time to restore backup and things like that. It has to be live to the level that you must compare. You must be able to compare lineage where it was coming from at the end of Q3 versus this year. You see what I'm getting at here? That's more than where is it coming from, is even comparing where it was coming from before, because they changed something underneath you had no idea, and that's why these numbers were wrong. So supporting version management not only in the past, but also in the future. What does it mean in the future? Well, they want to change. They need the reports to include this kind of information. So now that might affect the propagation of your personal information. So you need to also figure out lineage on future configuration or architecture. It is an interesting problem, but regulations really piggyback on lineage, that's for sure.
Absolutely. Thank you very much indeed. Changing the topic again this time and staying with you, Christian. What is the role of enterprise-grade data lineage in enabling AI model governance with explainable lineage? Obviously, lineage is complicated and can be very complicated. It has a job to do. And where is it in the AI model governance space?
It is often forgotten today. People are jumping in AI very quickly. The trend is to say, I'm going to get a data product, and it's got to be a trusted data product. So make sure it has the data quality on it. All the zip code are valid, all the fields are complete, the list of values is good. So I've got a trust score, I've got all sorts of information. But most of the products, what they have not measured as a dimension of the data products is how much do you know about this existing data? Because, garbage in, garbage out. Your AI will be as good as you got good data. Not only that it's good quality, but you know where it's coming from. And Lineage, again, has it been used by other BI reports? So sometimes in the validity of input for AI, it's like in BI. Am I the first one looking at this data? Or no, I'm going to do some AI that might find new answers. But if you know this data has already been used in other context of BI and you know where it's coming from, it's much better information. But AI, in many ways, the technology is very different. You still have the same problem to start with trusted data that includes data quality and lineage and existing usage of this information. The only difference between a information that comes out of a BI report versus the output of an AI, LLM or anything, and say, that's the result I got, that's the number I got. The difference, if it's using a BI tool, a reporting tool, I can prove it to you beyond any reasonable doubt, all the formulas deep inside any of these things on that pie chart, everything, why is it that number? The only challenge we're going to see with AI is there is a dark side going on between here is the answer to your question, there is the input I've proven to you, but the best I can do, it's good input, here is the lineage about it, but the logic of how the large models or the AI engine give you that answer cannot be explained. It's in the trust me kind of story. So that's always an interesting story. So for me, AI is not that much different with BI with respect to data lineage needs and data quality and trusted data products. It's the how can you justify that number at the end versus a BI report?
Okay, fine. Victor, what would you say there in terms of lineage and AI and control, I suppose?
Yeah, but I think it's data lineage is super important, both when it comes to your developing your models and training them, because you need to understand when I do build this new model, be it AI or some more specific model, you need to understand where did I get this data from? What is the quality? And also, who can I reach out to if there's something wrong with the data? Who can I ask? Is it trustworthy data? So that's an underpinning it. But also, so when it comes to training the model, but of course, when I then put the model in operations, I need to know what data I'm putting in there, which is constantly being used to generate, I don't know, probability of default, credit scores, or whatever you have. And I need to understand, again, where is that data coming from? But also, you can use this because to assign ownership to things. So I can own the model, I can own the model output, but I can't be responsible for the data going in. So that you can then work with more finely grained ownership of the data if you know the lineage and where the data is coming from. So there are multiple aspects of this, but it's core to AI governance and model governance in general.
Thank you very much indeed, both of you. And let's take a break. I have some audience questions here. I'm going to put the first one back to you, Victor. It says, how does the panel see data lineage procurement? Are we talking build or buy or both?
Well, it very much depends on you need to understand how does your infrastructure look like. I mean, if you are an institution, you're fully in a modern data infrastructure, you're using AWS or using solely Informatica, then I think you should probably you can look safely to buy a technology which can integrate with your data architecture, literally. The problem generally starts that you will have so many different types of technologies in your landscape that there will be examples where you will buy something, one or more components that can automate your lineage, but you have to be prepared to manually feed these tools you have bought with your own data. So you need to make sure that whatever tool you buy, they can also integrate data lineage metadata, which you have created yourself and you provide them with them. If that kind of makes sense.
Okay, yeah. Anybody want to add to that on the build or buy?
I obviously have a buying interest in that because I supply the metadata lineage components. It's just a reminder that it's a dirty job, but somebody's got to do it. A couple of things I would say about that. Data lineage is a lot more complex than people think. It's not about connecting a tool and getting the metadata and you're done. Some people often ask me, why are you the one providing the lineage to Informatica, Power Center, or cloud data integration? They already own all the source code, of Power Center and that. And I said, well, it's a lot more complex than that, because even if you own the tool, there is a lot of languages inside. You can have pages of Snowflake SQL or Spark scripts, and you need to understand 6 or 7 different dialects and have an emulator, really a true emulator of that BI or DI tool with the runtime variables to get the true, column level lineage out of that. And for us, the same story happened with Microsoft a few years later when they OEM with us. They said, we need the lineage of all these tools. Don't worry about Microsoft. We are Microsoft, and then they realized on their own Power BI, that was the same story all over again. You need an emulator of the Power Query engine, and then you need the parsers and compilers of every variation of SQL or Spark that can go inside. So it is very complex. And by the way, as soon as it's finished, it's almost obsolete because there is a new version of these tools coming all along. And the reason some of these vendors don't provide true deep lineage SDK to them, it's because they would have to maintain it. And that prevents them from improving their tools year to year. They wonderfully allow us to say, oh, we're going to change everything. You're going to have to rewrite, but it's our job to make the lineage work again. But they wouldn't want to have each customer doing that one by one. So we have to support what each of these vendors will release next year. The same way we still support, I should not say it, but old version of Business Object or Cognos or even Irwin or whatever, but are no longer supported by these vendors. But trust me, in all these large banks and insurance, if something works, you don't remove it, even if it's no longer supported. And, when I often talk to some of these banks in terms of build versus buy lineage, he said, name a tool, name a DI, name a BI. We probably have it somewhere used in our architecture, in our primary bank, or one of our sub-banks. So if you start to have exception, or if you want to keep up with that, it's a lot of work.
Absolutely, thank you. Coming to you, Mark, the next one, and this one asks, to what extent of enterprise-grade data lineage does an FI need? It rings bells for me when we were many years ago in Lineage that it wasn't necessarily required at top-notch everywhere. Where would you sort of suggest what were the extent for an FI?
Well, if I understand what the question is, I would say that it's data use cases, it's business objectives and data use cases. It's a regulatory objective. How is that regulatory objective being achieved, and what data is required in that? Answers your question. Don't try to big bang lineage. Don't go out and do lineage on every piece of data you can find, ad hoc. Approach it by aligning to business objectives as you go. So you're delivering value to the business, you're lowering the risk, in the regulatory environment is the way you should approach it.
Okay, thank you very much indeed for that. And Victor,
in that approach, I would add for one second, don't do it everywhere. Mark is so right. And I would add, start from the end where the business users are. You start with the reports and find you where left. I've seen so many times the classic, we read left to right, so we want to start, but it takes too long. Get return on investment early. You can get more lineage later. But start at least between your main data store and your BI tools and find your way to the left. So Mark is right. Don't swallow everything up front. Measure things that can be usable for the business users is a good way to start.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. And Victor, coming back to you, and it is perhaps something you've experienced or experienced with colleagues. How can firms ensure lineage when there is still legacy systems and data silos? Obviously, you need to account for these.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying, that, and that was a tied to the previous question. Before starting on data lineage, you need to have at least an understanding of what technologies are you using and how is that set up in the bank. So almost before you start doing lineage, you have to do almost some form of pre-lineage to understand, okay, roughly which are the main technologies, roughly how are flowing, because that will also guide you, okay, what types of tools should I then buy? Because at least that will capture these things. So, but it is what Christian says, this is a dirty job. And no matter which tool you buy, there is an expectation out there that I just installed the tool and hey presto, I have full lineage and I can just lean back and I will just, that's sadly not the way. You will have to put feet on the ground as well to some extent to get the basic understanding of what do I need to integrate my tools with. And that's where these silos come in. You will find them. That's the fact of life. And you just have to work through each of those silos and integrate them and stitch them together. And then that's the sad answer to this question, I'm afraid.
Sarah, if I can, at the risk of offending Christian, a fool with a tool is still a fool. You know, what is your process that you're trying to execute, your data management process, your compliance process? Yeah, and the tools got to be configured to the process, which Victor said, the boots on the ground. You know, so many people have, whether it's lineage or just overall metadata management. Now, I've got a metadata management problem. I need to buy a catalog. They buy a catalog, and 2 years later, they go, I still got a metadata management problem. This catalog is not any good. That was not the right approach to the solution at all.
Right.
And data
Okay.
catalog did not help in that story, because unfortunately a lot of them were cloud only, and that already doesn't answer the silo. You need as much support on-prem or legacy, whatever you want to call it, as cloud, because both worlds will coexist for a long time. And I mean, yes, I mean, you need a process in place with a focus that gives return on investment up front.
Okay. I think we'll have to leave it there for today. So thank you very much to our audience for your questions, and of course to our speakers for their answers. Let's get back to my agenda. Let's run a final audience poll. The question is, what extent of business and operational benefits could your organization gain from enterprise-grade data lineage? So while you answer that question, and again, you can tick as many boxes as you think are appropriate to your organization, let me come back to Victor and talk a little bit about the benefits of getting all this right and the penalties of getting it wrong.
If we focus on something, on the benefits, and I focus on something completely different, and I'm speaking of from my experience here, that what we are seeing, the main reason to have a good lineage is actually to give us a chance to modernize our whole infrastructure and basically move to a more modern paradigm. Because once you do lineage, you will figure out, okay, we have these crappy flows, but you want to move away from those. So literally, data lineage will give you some, okay, so this is the data we have. This is how we use it. Now we are use all integration patterns on systems. We want to move to something new. And data lineage will be able to guide you, okay, where do you need to do the most investments to benefit the business side, to benefit your regulatory agenda, to simplify your whole infrastructure really. But to simplify something, you kind of need to understand how it really looks. So for me, the main benefit, apart from, of course, being compliant, is that it also gives you a way to say, okay, chart your way forward. So where do we need to establish these data products? Where should I invest to bring extra benefit to your financial institution? So that would be my main benefit. Of course, the same is the flip side of that, is that you will incur penalties by the regulators if you don't do this. And of course, you will be challenged when you try to be more modern and to create more modern products such as data products or more advanced models, because you will not know where and how to use them really. So those would be my main benefits as I see them, at least.
Okay, that's great. Mark, what would you say there?
I would take it back to a comment that I made earlier that data lineage is a major component of metadata. What is metadata? Metadata is everything that I need to know about my data to get it and keep it in control. And that control is not at one place. That control is as the data lives across your organization, and that gets you into the life cycle and needing to follow that lineage to have a complete set of metadata. If you have that comprehensive, now I'll answer your question, Sarah. If you have that comprehensive metadata, what's the benefit? Improved regulatory compliance, reduced audit risk, greater trust in the data and the models, bringing the AI back into play. The metadata of the data going into your models and the metadata on what's happening to that data in the model. Enhance business agility. If I've got this understanding of my data as changes come into my environment, as regulatory requirements change, I'll be much more agile to be able to respond to that. And then finally, what's it all about? On the opportunity side for the business, better data quality leads to better decision making throughout the organization.
Okay, lovely. And Christian, would you like to add a comment there?
No, I think they targeted very well. I mean, bottom line, with data lineage, you understand your data, and I like the extra point Victor added at the beginning, that it also helps if you want to migrate or change to new technology. Well, having the full lineage of your existing, infrastructure, that helps do that. And remember, when people move to new technologies, they usually target new applications or new problems to solve. What work, leave it work. For example, leave it on Teradata or Oracle, it all works. And then progressively they can bring that to the new platform. But at least if they understand the lineage before, and they can even lineage, I mean, with advanced tools, you can compare the lineage on the old with the new to make sure it has the same transformation and the same result. It's your architecture. It helps modernizing. As Mark said, it's even more relevant beyond compliance to get into AI. I mean, understanding where your data is coming from, even more important. So all of the above, I think both Victor and Mark gave great answers there.
Lovely. Thank you very much indeed, all of you. And coming to our final item today, I'd like to ask all our speakers again to offer some advice for practitioners working on enterprise-grade data lineage. We've heard many good things that should be happening, but which are the key points? Mark, please, would you start here?
So I think, I thought about this long and hard. What are three tidbits here? We just talked about it. Be use case driven. Don't boil the ocean. And I do adopt what Christian's saying. Reverse engineer. Go to the end user of the data, and work yourself back. Understanding that data. Second, we all need to drive for automation to achieve scalability, but we still got to curate all along in that. Use the automated tools, for the technical lineage, but we're still going to have to bring the human layer into play, on the business lineage to be able to match those two up. And then finally, think design content, back to my design observability and data observability. Quit thinking about your design as documents. Oh, I got that policy on the shelf over there. I've got that standards for metadata management on the shelf over there. Bring that content to life and use it in your process in a way that you've got that design observability, match it up with what you can prove actually happened to the data. And then at that point in time, it's not compliance by dashboard of just saying, I can point at this rule, I can point at that piece of data. I know that it's in control because of what exactly has happened to my data.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Victor, what advice would you share?
Yeah, I guess to start with is you probably need to understand, what do you mean by lineage? I mean, why is it? And you have to understand, what is it? Why are you trying to do lineage? What's your main driver for lineage? Because if it is the regulatory route, so if I read the regulations and I read them word by word, I will never be done. It's all reports, it's all models, it's all KRIs. That pretty much covers Lineage for 99% of any financial institution's data. So do a tiering, do a very hard tier. Where do I absolutely need to do Lineage? And use that as a starting point. Develop a work process for how to establish further Lineage and do that and show a proof of concept. And wherever you can, always try to align like regulatory requirements. If they can, you need to be able to show that it has to have some benefit to business as well. No, don't only focus on the regulatory side. I think those would be 2 or 3 things that I would like people to do.
Okay, thank you. And some final words from you, Christian, please.
All of the above, definitely. I mean, data lineage, don't do data lineage just for compliance. It's really about the core of understanding your enterprise architecture. It's the core for change. Make sure when you pick tools that you target both, again, connecting IT with your business users. And the business users, not just compliance. You know, the story I explained about the business user experience on reports, finding the right reports across all your BI tools and see where it's coming from and what else do I have. It's a byproduct of Lineage, but a very end user experience. And then they will come from more to understand, as Mark mentioned, you know, what are the business glossaries and the business processes behind that. And you got to start small, start from the end, and the no child left behind also. Make sure it's not just a simple inventory of your database. You know, you need all the BI, all the DI. You need to let it go deep, even if the business users do it shallow. Start from the end, start small, and try it basically. But selection of the right tools does matter at the beginning so that you don't narrow yourself down on a lot of things. I mean, there are cost implication, make sure you don't pay per connector. There are tons of things to look at beyond that to be successful as that, so that you're not victim. The more users you have, it costs you more. The more data you bring in your catalog, it costs you more. The more connector, it costs you more. No, think about also the whole metadata management approach so that it's a sizable long-term with short-term goals, and so that your price doesn't explode, because that will kill you right there if it doesn't scale price-wise.
Okay, thank you, Christian, and thank you to all our expert speakers today for sharing their expertise and their experience indeed. Thank you too to Meta Integration for sponsoring the webinar. Before we close, just a reminder of the A-Team Group events that I shared with you earlier and that you can sign up for today. On June the 26th, we'll be in New York City with our AI and Capital Markets Summit. Then September the 4th, we'll be hosting a webinar on unlocking value in terms of harnessing modern data platforms for integration, analytics, visualization, and reporting. And just after that, on the 9th, we're hosting a webinar about AI governance best practices. So some of the things we've spoken about today will be coming back to your desk soon. That said, that's it for today. So thank you again to Christian, Mark, and Victor, and thank you to all of you who've taken part in the webinar. Please complete our feedback form, as we're always keen to hear your views and improve our products. Meantime, thanks again and goodbye.